This week's episode is brought to us by the label A Few Good Records. They're releasing a compilation album called The Sun Will Rise on Better Days. The album will raise money for the charity Trans Lifeline. It is 14 tracks from 16 artists, including ska bands such as Backyard Superheroes, Joker's Republic, Voluntary Hazing, and Leonardo Divorcio with a guest spot by K-Moy. The album comes out on September 2nd on afewgoodrecords.bandcamp.com. It will cost $2, but you can donate more if you want to. The Sun Will Rise on Better Days, out September 2nd. Pick it up. Okay, gang, here we go. The In Defense of Ska tour with Mustard Plug, Bucko 9, and Omnigone is hitting the West Coast this September. Tickets are now available. This is a tour you won't want to miss. Aaron Carnes will be there reading new chapters from the expanded edition of his book and answering questions. September 8th, San Diego. The 9th, Las Vegas. The 10th, Mesa, Arizona. The 11th, Garden Grove. The 12th, San Jose, California. The 13th, San Francisco at Bottom of the Hill. 14th, Sacramento. 15th, Eugene, Oregon. 16th, Seattle, Washington. And the 17th in Portland, Oregon. Be there.
Victor Rice didn't expect to play bass in a ska band, but with a little pressure, he caved and ended up joining the Scofflaws in the late 80s. From there, he continued to play in other groups like the New York Ska-Jazz Ensemble, and he became Moon Records' go-to producer for a while. He worked on several great records, including the Pietasters Oolooloo and Skavoovie and the Epitones Ripe. Victor continued to grow and evolve as a producer, engineer, and a live analog dub performer. Now currently a resident of Brazil, he continues to play music and work behind the board and look for creative ways to innovate.
Aaron, do you listen to much jazz?
I don't actively seek out jazz. Sometimes it's background music.
Yeah.
How about yourself?
No, jazz has never been anything that I've been interested in. However, I really like Victor Rice's approach to blending jazz with ska.
Sure.
Something about taking jazz musicianship and applying it to ska, it makes it so much more palatable.
Well, ska, a major component of ska is jazz already, so it's in the DNA of the music, which, by the way, I love ska, and I love traditional ska, and I love jazzy ska.
Yeah. Sidebar.
Yeah.
I've been listening to a lot of dub lately.
Oh, yeah?
So I was really excited to talk to Victor about dub music.
Mm-hmm.
I liked hearing about their approach to it and using old school technology to accomplish it.
I love talking to musicians that are sort of committed to the analog approach to music.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't have to, but you choose it, and then it enhances your art, in my opinion.
Definitely.
So you have won 2 Latin Grammys, or is it more than that?
2. One in 2015 and one in 2016.
And this was for engineering or mixing?
Yeah, mixing. It's not like I won the Grammy. It's because the artists won the Grammy, and the categories weren't, because there is a category for best engineering, and that's not what happened in this case. What happened is that I mixed 2 records that won Grammys.
But so you're part of the team.
Yeah.
You still get a Grammy, right?
Yeah, I'm looking at the trophies right now.
Sick.
Clients love them. It scares them.
You ever drink out of it?
They're not big enough.
Oh, okay.
So the artists, these are Brazilian artists?
Yes. The first one was Tulipa Ruiz, which was she had a solo record called Dance. And it was recorded at Red Bull Station in Sao Paulo, which was, or I think was, a beautiful place, and with the same engineer as the other one. So it's recorded at Red Bull Station, mixed here, and mastered by a guy named Felipe Tischauer in Miami.
Mm.
And both of those Grammys went the same route. Both of those records were recorded the same place, mixed at the same place, mastered at the same place. 2 different producers, but both excellent producers, and actually for me, there was less to do than normal. I usually get projects where it's like, oh, see what you can do with the drums, or see what you can do about that, instrument or whatever. Yeah, see if you can fix the problem we had with it, either musically or technically, right? So I get a lot of projects that are not big budget, and there's a lot of work to do. And these 2 records came to me, and it was like there was almost nothing to do. It was really just get all the ducks in a row and not get in the way, in a sense. There wasn't any of me putting my own sound into it, or they were beautifully written, performed, arranged, recorded. By the time they got to me, there was nothing critical that I did. You know what I mean? It was an easier. It was way. It's like the big jobs are easy. It's the little indie stuff that can get you going for like 2 days on the same mix. Like, what the hell?
Yeah. Do you find that it's just easier to have a good album when everything just gets played right in the first place?
Oh yeah. I had this sort of a mantra of sorts that it goes, the master is not important as the mix. The mix is not as important as the recording. The recording is not as important as the performance, and the performance is not as important as the song. And as long as the song is good, everything else, it gets easier. Or it doesn't have to get easier. You know what I mean? I mean, there are some amazing records that don't sound good, but the songs are beautiful,
What's the worst sounding record that you think is an amazing record?
That's an awesome question. Oh my God.
I mean, I know mine.
I grew up listening to David Bowie, and Heroes will always be like one of my favorite records of all time. And just because of the songs and because of who I was when I heard it, 16, 17 years old, and the memories that it reminds me of where I was, and all of that, And I listened to it recently after maybe 30 years of not actually paying attention anymore, and listened to it, and I was like, geez, I don't like that mix at all.
Yeah.
I mean, the voice could be louder, it's like, what the hell is he saying? And geez, I'm not really feeling this mix at all, and it's funny. I kind of feel that way about Led Zeppelin, because those mixes are crazy. They are really crazy. But I don't think they would have had the impact if they were mixed any other way. Who knows? Of course, they're brilliant songwriting, performance. So the recording could have probably been done one way or another. But I just think it was so. When I listened back to it critically in a studio setting, and I was like, geez, it's so weird. I can't even say it's wrong or bad. It was just like not at all how I remembered it.
Yeah. Your memories can definitely color the way that it sounds. I actually just listened to the title track Heroes. And I think it was a remastered version on Sunday, like 2 days ago. And I couldn't believe how bad it sounded. Like Bowie's vocal performance on it's great, but everything just sounds so weird. And like, there's not a lot of punch to anything. There's a lot of elements that are happening that I'm like, can't really make out what's happening. And this is really something.
Yeah. Brian Eno, I really like a lot of things that he did.
Oh, for sure.
Creatively as a musician. He's one of those musician engineers like myself. I'm trained in music, not engineering. But, there've been a lot of successes with that kind of thing. I remember one guy who mentored me into using a computer. He said it's much easier to teach a musician how to be an engineer than the other way around. You can't teach music to somebody who isn't, already got the talent,
It's a lot easier when it's just the number side of it. Yeah,
the technical side you can learn, but the musical aspect and stuff, and being a musician during a recording session is great, because when they say, let's go back to the bridge, I know what they mean, whereas an engineer would be like, oh, is that 1 minute and 30, or is that, what number is that, what in time, where I'm like, oh, that's what are you talking about? The D minor? Yeah, D minor, cool. Yeah, an engineer would be lost with that kind of reference,
So, as somebody who's played music and produced and engineered for a long time, did you ever expect to be on the receiving end of a Grammy in any capacity? In Defense of Ska, we'll be right back.
My name is Ryan Roberts. I want to invite you all to the Bass Shed podcast. I speak with bass players and other musicians from all over the world and from every genre about artistry, career, and culture. If you're a double bassist, an electric bassist, or an artist interested in hearing about the artist process, subscribe to the Bass Shed podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
I certainly wasn't gunning for one. It wasn't. It definitely wasn't on my radar. I didn't think I'd ever be. I think if I would have had to have stayed in New York, I thought, if I wanted to work with like big names or something, But that's a whole other subject why I left. But getting here, I was more like, well, now I got low overhead. I can do stuff I like, and not necessarily what's on the radio. So yeah, it came as a big surprise.
So let's go back to New York. So you played, you were in the Scofflaws. You joined at the beginning of the band being the Scofflaws.
I joined in '88. I was 21, and they were still the New Bohemians.
Oh, okay.
And they had a single out on a Moon compilation. That's where they were historically, as far as records go, and they had gigs every once or twice a month. And it was an old buddy of mine from Huntington, where I grew up, who always wanted me to join the band, but I was like, I'm going to school now, I just moved to New York. Why would I want to come back to Huntington, And so I was kind of putting it off, and finally I totally remember what it was. I was at a music store buying strings in Huntington, and I get up to the line of the cashier, and she is hot, totally beautiful, totally hot. I'm like, wow. And I, keep it cool. I'm not an idiot, so I don't think anything's going to happen or anything. So I'm just paying for my strings, and she goes, "You're Victor Rice." And I was like, oh shit, now I got something, This is great. And I'm like, yeah, that's me every day, because my boyfriend, Richie Brooks, he really wants you to join the band. And I was like, yeah, I told Richie I'd like to, but, it's just that I'm in New York all the time, and I'm, moving away from the band thing and playing in orchestras and shit. She goes, oh, that's too bad, because Louis Lamangino is playing guitar. And this guy was a prodigy. And I remember growing up in high school and looking up to this guy like, oh, my God, this guy could play anything. So I call him up. I'm like, is it true you're playing with Richie Brooks? What's up with that? Because Richie was famous for just having people come in. It was more of a garage thing and very social and unserious and playful. And, in fact, he is a great bass player, Sammy Brooks, right? And but he decided he wanted to play tenor sax. That's why he was after me to play the bass. And I was like, yeah, maybe, He wasn't really taking the saxophone so seriously. He just wanted to be in the front of the stage. He was tired of being in the back with the drums. That's why he switched instruments, so he could be in the front line. And he's the social person. I mean, he belongs there, so no problem with that. So I'm like, Louis, what are you doing in this band, this prodigy, right? I'm like, what are you doing with these guys? He goes, you know what? Their crowds are bigger than anything else I do. And they're all having fun, and it's like a night off. I was like, huh. So it became my night off to go there every Tuesday night. My night off from conservatory and stressing, to just play some reggae and ska with these guys.
So New Bohemians started out doing kind of a lot of different styles, but then then it became more about being ska and reggae. So they were already just doing ska reggae when you joined?
Yes. Before the New Bohemians, Richie called his outfit the live sax show. and they had the best flyers in town. I mean, this is back in the day, right, where flyers advertised gigs,
Mm-hmm.
like little lampposts and, like and paper on, someone's out there stapling shit on the streets, and that was Richie. So I always knew what he was up to because of the flyers, and I knew that, the live sax show, that sounds like fun. I had a picture of 3 saxophones. He's playing the tiny soprano, and from there they went to the New Bohemians, and I think the key figure in making it a ska band rather than this R&B sort of all-encompassing show was Mike Drance, who would go on to sing with the Blue Beats. He was a bari sax player, and he was the serious guy in the band, the grouch that was like, no, that doesn't sound right. That's not. And it wasn't like he was a school musician, but his ears were impeccable for the style. I mean, a great singer, totally knew the styles, totally knew the records, knew all the songs. So really, it was Mike Drance that made the New Bohemians a ska band, and that's why I got in there, because at the time I was studying Bartok in school and really getting into it, and studying Eastern European folk music, which was what his source was for his, modernist compositions and stuff. He was using very basic folk material from the area. And when I listened to the Skatalites for the first time, it was Don Drummond record, like, man, that backbeat is the same thing as that they're doing, in Eastern Europe, in Central Europe. It's that dun, dun, dun. Like, how funny is that, these guys are doing it halfway across the world, from completely different pretense, and how funny that this upbeat really is sort of a world beat, and it's jazz oriented, and it's instrumental, and it's reggae. So what's not to like if you're a bass player? You already like reggae, and you're learning jazz, and it all just seemed like a great night off every Tuesday night.
So you came in playing upright bass right off the bat?
No, I brought that in later. Because like I said, I didn't want to take it seriously, and I wasn't going to be, bringing out my string bass to Huntington on the train or in a car. So I wouldn't even bring my bass. Richie had a bass. So I would just show up and hang out, drink beer, and play bass. It was fun. I mean, even if in those first gigs, I would go by train, and Richie would bring a bass and an amp, and I would just show up.
Great.
Yeah, I was pampered. But he really wanted me in because he knew. He was like, "You don't know, but I know you're gonna love this shit." And I was like, "I don't know." He's like, "I know you don't know, but I know. I know you, and I know." He was totally right. He was brilliant.
Was it your idea to do the upright, or was it something that Richie was thinking about?
Nah, probably Mike Drance bullied me into it.
Yeah. I mean, obviously you were trying to get, trying to access that more traditional ska element with the upright, right? That was at the thought process.
Yeah. We began opening for the Skatalites, which really knocked me out, and I got to watch. And yeah, that even got me further into it, further down the rabbit hole. And I started bringing the string bass.
Scofflaws, especially that first record, that's one of my favorites from the 90s era. I like that it has a lot of like traditional touch points, but it's also modern. It's also fun and lighthearted. And it's like, it's like instrumental stuff and vocal stuff. So it's got like a nice blend. I could see how, if you were in New York in that time period, how it would be a lot of people would come out and just want to go to the show. In Defense of Ska, we'll be right back.
Hey, it's Pat Flynn here, host of the award-winning podcast, the Smart Passive Income Podcast, which was created to help you learn how to become an entrepreneur. And in the simplest way, too. Entrepreneurship can be very difficult. I like to simplify things. And I interview people like Josh Hall and Shane and Jocelyn Sams and Maria Fela. Who are they? Well, they're people just like you, people who have taken action after listening to the show and have built a business that has changed their lives. And I'd love to share an episode with you that I think will inspire you to get started too. Check out the link in the description or go to smartpassiveincome.com/122 to get inspired, get what you need to get started, and change your life. You got this, and thank you.
Yeah. I mean, by the time that record came out, we had already had a good crowd, especially in Long Island. We had a lot of gigs, and we were socking the money away. And we paid for that record, but we were smart about it too, because we did as much rehearsing as possible outside of the studio. I mean, the tunes already worked out on stage, but then we, rehearsed without the horns, just the rhythm section, so we could get used to the form without having any cues, because that's how we would record, right? And then we'd rehearse just the horns, because that's how they were going to record, just the horns on top of, So they had to have their thing together.
Can you tell people what Richie was like as a frontman?
Great band member, great frontman. Not the business, shark that, could be useful, but that's not Sammy. That's not his way. He's easygoing. He's very zen. So he worked a lot on the show. Like, he'd have tunes. He would have tunes, but he would also bring in ideas for, like, this is what I want to do, like that whole watch the hand, or, these theatrics. He brought those, and that was a lot of fun. Always fun. I mean, honestly, it was a pisser being in that band. I think the only reason I didn't stay was because I saw that it was already working for Sammy. He had everything he ever wanted. And me, I was still, he was 10 years older than me. So here I am, like maybe 27 when I quit, and 28 around there. And that means he was 38,
Yeah.
And by then he was like, this isn't gonna, he didn't really want more than being able to play on Long Island. And in fact, that's what he does to this day. He's very content to be actually playing in small dives with people right there, like, sweating on him. He lives for that shit.
I've talked to several like ska punk bands from Long Island, that were obviously like the younger generation from Scofflaws, and they all idolized the Scofflaws. And it was always like, yeah, we put this band together, and like, we just did everything we could to open up for Scofflaws. Like local legends during the mid 90s.
Yeah, certainly Long Island has its own sort of isolated scene, and bands that do well there, in a sense, don't have to really go to the city if they don't want to. But the more they go to the city, the more cred they have on Long Island. So, we're playing CBGBs, we're playing clubs like that. And so that meant something to, the folks back home. It sounds like so far away, right? It's like 40-minute train ride into New York. And I'm making it sound like, yeah, down on the farm, they were real happy to hear what we were doing up in the Big Teddy. So, but to your point, back to your point, first CD was, big deal for us, and very easy to do. Very well rehearsed. We were in there. We recorded everything in 2 days, and we mixed everything in 3 days. And we were totally prepared. Excellent engineer, Bob Stander, and beautiful studio. We spent the money in a nice place, and we stayed there as little time as possible.
Mm-hmm.
How long did you spend on the recording?
Oh yeah, 5 days. Something
Quick.
Like that. Maybe six, in a really nice studio with a really good engineer and a very rehearsed band. So it was like in and out.
And that was also mixing while you were there and all that.
Yeah, 3 days recording, 2 days mixing, something like that, or 3 days mixing about.
That's fast.
For that whole record was done within 7 days easily. And when Bucket, heard about that, and he enjoyed the sound of the record, and he thought, God, you made this record for $5,000. That's amazing. And I think that's one of the reasons he wanted me to start producing for Moon Records because I could keep the budget down.
Oh yeah, because you produced the Scofflaws record as well, right?
I produced that record. It's credited as produced by the Scofflaws because we were trying to decide how to credit the production. Because people are like, oh, well, you did everything. You found the producer, you found the engineer, you found the studio, you chose the tape, you rehearsed. I was there for all rehearsals, just rhythm section or just horns. I produced the band effectively, coordinated things. But someone else was like, yeah, but we all paid for it. I'm like, yeah, that makes us all executive producers. So I didn't want to get into it. So I just said, yeah, produced by the Scofflaws. That's great. That's great. I stood my ground more for ska and hi-fi because I saw that having a credit as a producer was so important. That was our currency in the 80s and the 90s. That was what people saw. People bought physical product and they would see your name on it. I even got to the point where I was insisting that Produced by Victor Rice was on the outside of the record or CD so that somebody could see it without having to buy it.
Yeah.
And because of that, it started becoming something of a, very low-key trademark. But I just wanted that little, because I wasn't charging a lot to make. I never charged points on a record. For those who don't know what points are, it means get a percentage of all profits in perpetuity. And that was back in the day when music made money.
Yeah.
So most producers, to this day, most producers get a point, which is a percentage point. So, I want, I get 3 points on a record. It means I got 3% of all profits on the record. And I never did that. What I did do was rent equipment to record the band. I would rent, and that would later go on the band's dime, which I didn't really, figure out. Maybe I just didn't want to do the math. Where's the money coming from, right? But I was renting some sweet vintage microphones, or choosing to record in a vintage place. Got really more involved in the production end because of Bucket, because of Moon, because he really gave me gave me a gig. He gave me a career.
So some of the Moon records that you produced, obviously there's the first two Scofflaws, which we discussed. You did Pietasters Oolooloo, Slackers, first record, Better Late Than Never, Skavoovie, the Epitones album Ripe. Any other ones from that period that you did for Moon Records?
I really liked the Adjusters record.
Yeah.
Before the Revolution. That was and it was the opposite of recording Skavoovie, because Skavoovie was more like the Scofflaws. They had just come back from tour. All the songs were stupidly rehearsed. Really great musicians in that band. Everyone from Skavoovie is still playing in some field or another, and they're all busy, and they're all, they've all branched out. They all have made careers for themselves, really, really wicked bunch of little kids. I thought they were kids. They were like 10 years younger than me. But when I heard Rob Jost play the bass, I was like, fuck, who told him? I felt like betrayed by my teachers or something, I was like, why is he so good? I felt the same way when first time I heard Vic Ruggiero play the bass. I was like, fuck, he's 19 or 18. And, he plays like an old Motown guy.
So you said the Adjusters was the opposite of that. So what do you mean by that?
Yeah, well, Skavoovie, in and out, amazing studio, all done in a week. Very much like the first Scofflaws record. Very much. Matt Ellard was the engineer. It was done in Fort Apache in Boston. Excellent studio. Just top of the top. The Adjusters, the studio was quite good, but they showed up unrehearsed. They showed up like the Beatles. I got this idea for a song, let's spitball this. And I was like, what? the clock is running in the studio, and you guys are like, I think I got what? But they put it together. They really did. And we worked overtime. I saw it was worth it. And I love, Daraka as a person is what's not to love? He's just a beautiful, beautiful cat. and as a musician, as a talent, holy shit. So, I was on board, totally on board. And we got through it. At one point the tape snapped, the machine malfunctioned. It was hours before I had to get on the plane, go back to New York. And I was like, I'll fix it in New York. I mixed it in Brooklyn at the Coyote Studio, which is where a lot of 90s ska records were made. And so, yeah, there were little traumas and stuff. And that was a hard record to make. And I love the way it sounds. And Skavoovie was an easy record to make, and I love the way it sounds.
So I want to talk about New York Jazz Ska Ensemble, or New York Ska-Jazz Ensemble.
Yeah.
Were you the founder of that project?
I wasn't a founding member, I guess, because I was the first bass player they asked.
Okay, but it wasn't your concept.
No, it was Freddie and Rick. Rick Faulkner, nicknamed Chunk, trombonist from the Toasters.
Yeah.
At the time, Fred Ryder, was a sax player in the Toasters. And Carrie Brown had left the Skatalites and was playing keys with the Scofflaws. And the Scofflaws were opening for the Toasters on tour, and we all, like, the jazz heads just started hanging out, And Jonathan McCain on the drums, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking about all the original members were like guys who were hanging out on tour. And I remember it was at Carrie Brown's wedding, at his reception. I'm hanging out, and it was funny because Freddie and Rick were like, "Can we talk to you for a minute?" I was like, yeah, what's up? They were like, it was weird, I was like, "Come over here by the pool. I want to talk to you." And I'll go over there, and then it was Freddie and Rick talking about, we got this idea for a band. We're going to call it the Ska-Jazz Ensemble, and we want you on bass. We want Carrie on the keys. And we didn't decide on drummer. They didn't decide on the drummer for a little bit. I really wanted Tony Mason in there because he's just so good. He's such a monster in both categories, ska and jazz. The guy's a monster. And he's a drummer on the first Scofflaws record. He's my buddy from Manhattan School of Music. Tony Mason. Badass motherfucker. Anyway. So yeah, I was down, totally down. In fact, if they could make it work, it was because they're, it wasn't going to be we were like, they said they wanted to work around the Toaster schedule. Very much like the way these days, Dave Hilliard, the Rocksteady 7, they work around the Slacker schedule.
Yeah.
So when the Slackers aren't out there, Dave goes out with the Rocksteady 7. And it was very much like when the Toasters weren't out on the road, Freddie and Rick had a chance to do something. And that's what we did. And it was a success from the jump. It was my first time in Europe. The very first tour we did, the guitarist wasn't available. And Vic Ruggiero did it on guitar.
Oh, really?
He was great. Yeah, Vic Ruggiero played on the first Ska-Jazz Ensemble tour in Europe.
Oh, wow.
Just a weird trivia.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Tidbit. Because Devon James was a guitarist, and he was a guitarist for the Skatalites. Brilliant cat. Oh my God, just so solid character and musician. But he wasn't available for the tour.
New York during the 90s has always been more connected to the jazzier side of ska, compared to, for the most part, the other parts of the country, other scenes in the country. But I really liked this project because it was more, it was kind of more overt. It was like kind of wearing that more on the sleeve and kind of leaning into it more. Was the project well received overall, or did it feel like it was a select part of the scene that was interested in it?
Good question. I didn't pay attention. Like those first gigs, we were always playing with the Toasters or with some other band, so there was a crowd no matter what. But and that was what it was like in the first couple of tours with the Ska-Jazz, and after that, it just became its own entity, like with its own fans and its own, they do really. I think they're on tour right now as we speak.
Oh wow!
Yeah, they're in Europe probably as we speak. They don't stop. Freddie doesn't stop.
So the members of the Scotalites are, a lot of, they moved, basically relocated to New York in the late 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And you were opening for them. You got to know them. Did you get to work with them at all?
I did. I got to know them opening up, and once Mike Drance left the Scofflaws, I was the next closest thing to a manager that the band had. So I would be the one to collect the money at the end of the gig. Something Richie wasn't really into, or often Richie would collect on the gigs that he got. But Mike had done a lot of the booking in New York. Mike Drance was not only the reason the Scofflaws were a ska band, but he's also the reason they played in New York and he knew who the Scatolites were. And he was the one hanging out with these guys and talking up the band and getting us gigs at like SOB in New York, or Wetlands, or just getting us to open for the Scatolites at like colleges like Stony Brook or something like that. A lot of Long Island stuff. It was a wonderful time. I had no idea. I had no idea I was living such like precious times at the time. Really amazing.
When you were settling up at the end of the night, did anybody ever try to stiff you?
One time, I remember it well. It was in New London, Connecticut. And the show was a matinee, and the promoter was just a kid. And if I was just a kid means if I was 30, he was 20, something like that. He's like, oh, we don't have the money. And then it's like, oh, that's too bad. I'll talk to the band. Let's see what we can do about it. And I found the microphone case for the club with all the microphones in them, in the case. And I picked it up and I put it into the van. And I think somebody saw me do it. And I was telling these guys, look, this is ours because they don't have the money, so I'm holding this for ransom. And they found the money. I gave them the microphones.
This is good advice for bands out there.
Amazing advice. I love that.
Yeah, it was the only time it ever happened, and it was like it wasn't like somebody trying to stiff. It wasn't like first few times Tosos came to Brazil and the promoter was literally leaving the building through the bathroom window, with the money and, like stupid stuff. This wasn't the case. This is some kid who never did a show before. He was like, oh, fuck, we don't have the money. I kind of feel bad now thinking about it. But at the time, I was vexed. I was like, that fucking kid, where are those microphones? Give me that shit. I was.
Now, I heard that you were kind of hanging around when they recorded Ball of Fire, and that you punched in a few bass parts to help out or something. Is that true?
That is true. I played on about half the tracks on Ball of Fire. Mm-hmm. It's so funny that you have to remind me that, because it was one of those things like, we will never talk about this. Don't even remember this. This never happened, And I literally just like, it's not very well in my memory, because I was like, I can't remember this. I can't remember I did this. Like I kind of deleted it, But so it takes somebody to go, didn't you play in Ball of Fire? I'm like, fuck, I did. Oh my God. Yeah. And what happened is that they asked me to come down. It's in Sony studio, a beautiful place, and had me hang out, and they were like, don't say anything. Just chill. And it was fun because at that point I was already musically very connected with Lester Sterling. This was before he had a series of strokes and things that left him a different person. But back then, he liked to play the piano, and I would pick up Brevitt's bass, and we'd just play standards or something. We never talked, but he knew I do the tunes, and we would just play together. And he would invite me to secret recording sessions and shit. It's really funny.
Oh.
Yeah, he was like, I was talking to Gaz Mail. Oh, yeah, I'm here to record the Skylights at such studio tomorrow morning. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. Can I go? No, VIP. It's all locked down. All right. And then Lester would come by and with the address scribbled on a napkin. What a prince. What a guy. I knew those guys. So I also knew Shay, who was their manager at the time. And Shay said, come on down. We're thinking of having you bring your bass. Bring your bass. We want to see if it sounds better than one that Brevett's using. So that was the premise to get me in there, to offer a bass for him to play. He didn't like it. He decided to use his bass that he used on the road. But I was in the session. I was already there. I had done a thing. I was a known entity. And after he left, after the first session, they were like, oh, look, we're going to record the whole record with him, and then we're going to call you afterwards to pick up the bass. Like, all right, that's cool. I had already figured out what was going on. I go there. Brevett's gone. The band is gone. It's just Nathan Breedlove, the trumpet player who's representing the Skatalites, and the producer, English guy whose name I can't remember, Trevor something, and the engineer. We tried doing it with my bass, but it just didn't have the thing. And it's funny because his bass is really tough to play. It's the scale is bigger. He was a big dude, he was tall. He was tall. And big hands and stuff. And I think the strings were like gut strings instead of steel. It was a very different instrument. So I wound up having to play on his instrument to make it more, easy for the engineer and easier for everyone else for consistency's sake, right? Sort of hide behind his instrument. And it worked. And I did like half that record at least.
Was there a problem with his playing? What was going on? Why did they want you to play on some of it?
Well, there were two things. One was that his left hand had kind of gone off for about 5 years already or something like that. And when I say left hand, that means intonation. So his intonation, he wasn't hitting the notes exactly where they ought to be. Meanwhile, his right hand, killer. He never lost the beat. He never lost the rhythm. He never lost the attack. He never lost that Cuban thing. And but his left hand, he was losing his pitch. The other thing is that he would reharmonize sometimes and insist that no, the harmony goes like this. It doesn't go to D minor, it goes to F, and there'd be arguments that I heard later about from Laurel Aiken that they would just, wind up letting him do whatever he did and replacing it later.
Oh, wow.
which I had done on a Ska Titans record. Laurel Aiken meets the Skatalites. All I had to do was replace 4 bars at the end of each bridge, which he insisted was a series of chords that the whole band didn't agree, and all I had to do was replace the bass and it worked. So so Brevett had these two things going on. One was that he was insisting on the harmony being different, and he was not playing in tune. So I was in there to do that, and I had to do my best. The hardest part for me was the right hand, trying to get that sense of attack that he got. It's just his time was always just priceless to the end.
Yeah, must have been a little intimidating. Yeah,
it was, but it's not the most intimidating thing I've ever done. Let me think. What's the most intimidating thing I've ever done? Auditioning for Juilliard was the most intimidating thing I've ever done.
What'd you do for your audition?
I don't remember, but there were a couple of it was a sonata. The idea would be a sonata and 3 orchestral excerpts and 2 etudes. But you had to go in there with 2 sonatas, 5 etudes, and 10 orchestral excerpts, and they would choose what they wanted to hear, So you had to have a whole repertoire. And I got in, David Walter let me in. David Walter, an amazing, string bassist and professor, taught at Juilliard and has a long history of this. His daughter is, what's her name? What's her first name? The last name's Walter, the actress in Arrested Development and in Archer. What's her name? She recently passed away.
Oh yeah. The mother in Arrested Development.
Yeah, and the mother in Archer.
Okay,
What's
I don't
her
know
name? Something Walter. Jeez. Anyway, his daughter. I didn't even know who she was at the time. So yes, the most intimidating thing I've ever done was to audition at Juilliard, but I got in.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah, didn't go. I should have gone, man.
Oh, you didn't go?
No, I went to Manhattan School of Music. They had jazz, they had contemporary, they had my old teacher. Yeah, I didn't go. It was fucked up.
Well, how do you think things would have turned out differently had you gone?
I think the only difference is that I could have said I'd gone to Juilliard. Like, holy shit, let me give you a raise. You know, like
Yeah.
that. I didn't know just how much clout that name had.
I want to talk about Version City now. So Version City, can you tell people what Version City is or was?
Virgin City was the name of the rehearsal space turned studio on East 3rd Street in Manhattan, in a basement rented by Jeff Baker of Stubborn Records. So Jeff was renting a basement in a building to rehearse his band. And also, he decided at one point, it's very funny. I remember this very well, but he had been given a certain budget from a label to make a record. And he had spent 3 or 4 days in a studio that he didn't like the situation. The engineer wasn't very experienced and he was watching the money go away. And he said, you know what? With the money left, I can buy a tape machine. I can buy a mixing desk. I can buy some microphones and I can do a better job than this guy. And he did. And from that point on, there was like the bare bones recording situation in the space. It was just known as the space.
Was this a Stubborn Records, Stubborn All Stars record that he got that money from?
I believe it was Skinnerbox, but I can't remember. It might have been Stubborn All Stars. I can't remember. But he didn't like the way it was going. And very, brilliant move was to say, there's just enough money left in the budget to do this myself. And he split from the studio. It was a bad situation in the studio. They didn't have their shit together.
So you kind of hung out. I know a lot. There was a group of people hung out, but you kind of hung out there quite a bit, right?
Yeah. At one point I was living not far. I was living on 9th Street. And so I was there a lot if I didn't have anything to do, which was which was often for a bass player. I think most bass players have some second life where, with something else that interests them, because it's just not enough. The bass just isn't enough. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because you can't sit there at a coffee shop with your acoustic guitar singing your heartfelt songs to an audience if you're a bass player.
Actually, I saw some guy with a washed-up bass on a platform subway that just knocked me out. Crooner, unbelievable. But what I'm saying is, like, there's not that much you need to know to get the job done as a bass player. It's kind of true. I mean, it's not like, the joke where the kid goes, Dad, I'm taking bass lessons. Oh, that's cool, son. Cool. What'd you learn today? I learned the first 3 notes on the E string, E, F, and G. Oh, whatever. That's cool. Week goes by. What'd you learn this week, son? Oh, I learned the 3 notes on the next string. A, B flat, B, C, all that's on the A string. Oh, whatever. Cool. Whatever. 3rd week goes by. Yeah. How's the lessons going? What's going on, son? He's like, Dad, I had to quit. I have too many rehearsals and gigs. I'm just too busy now. I'm in so many bands.
Did you kind of produce or engineer a lot of the stuff coming out of there? What was your relationship to the recordings, the Version City recordings, I guess?
I had a big influence in one way, indirectly, but I did spend a lot of time there. I had free time and it was nearby. And from up until that point, I had been producing records with an engineer. But the idea down in the space was you were the engineer and you had to just figure it out yourself. And H&J lived close lived close to the space as well. So I would normally call him, say I'm going to the space, or he would call me and say I'm going to the space, because the two of us there could figure shit out. Where one guy is scratching his head for an hour going, why can't I hear the left side? And another person looks in 2 seconds and goes, oh, the wire's out. You know, it's like, oh shit. You know, and like one person will see the obvious when the other one doesn't. And it's great to have two heads looking at the same thing, you know? So me and Jay learned a lot together. We cut our teeth and we just made, we made all our mistakes together and we did a lot, you know, and I learned a lot. I actually had to control, I had to be the engineer for the first time. I wasn't trained in it, but I had seen it enough and I'd done, I worked on things enough that to know what was involved. And at the scale that Version City was, which was 8 tracks, it was enough that I could wrap my head around, It wasn't such a big, complex system. So it was easy for us to wrap our heads around it. And the best part was that the clock wasn't running anymore. This was the first time I'm in a studio where I'm not paying to be there, just hang out. No one's using it. I go in there, I sweep up and clean up a little bit and light some incense and just figure some shit out. And I brought Eddie Ocampo down there to play drums on a few things. And I guess our drum recordings became kind of standard. Like there's one track called Damage that he played the drums on that was used, I think, like 6 times on various records, because people would just siphon off the drums rather than call Eddie back to do something. And like, I love the way he played on such and such a tune. Let's just record those tracks of the drums, because there were 2 tracks of drums at the time. There was the inside the kick drum and outside the kick drum. So basically there was a microphone in the kick and another one near the snare that was getting the hi-hat and everything else. So it's 2 tracks. You could record it to a Sony DATman recorder and then play it back to a fresh piece of tape and then start a new tune, build a new tune.
And so all the songs would just be to that same arrangement of drums?
Yeah, we had tricks. I mean, I'd used it like 3 times or 4 times. One time I used it, I played the tape backwards, so it was all in reverse. One time I recorded it at a slower speed. That was another thing we were like. Yeah. It was just because we could change the speed of the tape recorder. And we used that trick to make fake horns. Like if I had Buford down there, have him play the trombone, then I needed a trumpet, I would slow the tape down by a perfect fourth or something, figure out what the note was, tell him, all right, play these notes. And then when we sped it back up, it sounded like a trumpet.
That's so sick.
That's awesome.
And we did the opposite too. I had Anda Silaji came down there. She's a trumpet player, Jay's band, Orange Street. And we needed a trombone. So we had her play the trumpet to the tape going really fast, had her play something, and then slowed it back down, and it was a trombone. It was great.
You said there was some particular way you were very influential.
The drum tracks. Me and Eddie. I got some great recordings of him playing amazing drum tracks. And I think that was a big, even stuff I wasn't producing or working on, I'd hear that my drums were used. My drum recording from one of my songs or something will get used on another track, to build a new rhythm.
Do you feel like the limitations of that studio helped come up with some really creative ideas? I mean, you already said a couple, but I mean, I feel like those limitations really help you key in on being creative rather than futzing with stuff the entire time.
Absolutely. You nailed it. You nailed it. For me, creativity is, or let's say limitations are like the mother of creativity, because then you have to, and it's easier to create within limits. If you have everything, if you have the whole universe in front of you, where do you start? Where do you end? But if you only have 8 tracks, you're like, all right, let's do this thing. But it wasn't just 8 tracks, because we could bounce. I would create a rhythm with 8 tracks, like the track 1 would be the kick, track 2 would be all the rest of the drums, track 3 would be the bass, 4 on guitar, keys on 5, horns on 6, vocals on 7, backing vocals on 8. We're done. No, actually, no, not vocals. Maybe not horns. So there'd be like, drums and guitars, the bass and keys and percussion. And that would be 8 tracks. And then we would mix that to a DAT tape and then record the DAT tape to a fresh piece of tape. This is what the Beatles did. So we weren't,
sure,
geniuses by far. We were just doing what we had to do. And so then you had 6 free tracks. You had 2 tracks, which was the submix of the rhythm. And then you could add horns and vocals.
How far could you bounce though before you'd end up with sonic degradation where you're starting to lose some of the fidelity?
I mean, it was a tape machine, so you're losing fidelity from the jump.
Right from the get.
Yeah. And I never bounced more than once. I never bounced more than one rhythm track back to a new piece of tape. And even that was rare. It was kind of like, if you can't say it in 8 tracks,
Sure.
you're doing it wrong or something. Brian Dixon would agree with that, by the way. He's the engineer from the Agrolites and the guitarist, the Agrolites. He's also dub master. King Terror is his moniker.
That's a great name.
Mm-hmm.
Brian Dixon, this guy knows what it's about. And he's one of those guys that's like, man, if you can't say it in 8 tracks, figure something out because something's wrong there.
Was this during this time was when you got into doing dub?
Yes, for 2 reasons. One was because no engineer wanted to try and make these crazy exploding sounds on their, precious equipment. So I could never get another engineer to just, push it and try for these things. And the engineers I was working with had no experience with dub, didn't never listen to Lee Perry or King Tubby or nothing like that. So that was one thing. The other thing was that with the clock time not being money anymore, I could just experiment. Nobody had to be there. Once I had everything wired up and I had a tune on a tape machine, I could just hang out all night, just playing around and experimenting. And nobody was the wiser, and it didn't put anybody out, and it didn't cost me anything. It was just absolutely. Virgin City is where I learned the dub techniques, my dub techniques, and they haven't changed since.
Yeah, could you talk a little bit about some of your techniques?
Sure, I love that. Love talking about that. Well, it's based on the original because back in the late 60s, early 70s, there was only one way to make dub. Now, there are a few stories about how dub came about. One is the economic advantage of paying a band to play 1 song instead of 2, buying 1 song instead of 2, and then putting a dub on the B-side to complete, a single. So there was the economic capitalistic, advantage. Another one is that a tune was mixed and they forgot to put the lead vocal on it, and the record, acetate went straight to the party, and they played it at the party, and there was no vocal, so somebody started chatting on top of it. There are a few opinions of how dub started, but there's no confusion about how it was made. The engineer was participating musically in the recording by, like, everything was recorded, and the engineer could choose which tracks would play at any point with the faders, and he could send whatever instrument he wanted to in a reverb or an echo and play that way, and it became a musical performance of the engineer, all done in real time, manually. And I had always wanted to preserve that aspect because these days dub can be, it's a word that gets used more than, it's all encompassing. It's kind of like, you say the word ska and people are like, well, what exactly are you talking about? And it's the same with dub, you just say ska and people will know what, there's so much. You know what I mean? Like, I like ska. What does that mean? Real big fish? Don Drummond? I mean, what does that mean to you? You know?
So dub, rather than being a vibe, you're talking about dub being more of a technique.
It's a technique, and it became a genre, in the last 20 years or so, I'd say. But or maybe since then it's been a genre, but the word comes from the technique. It doesn't make sense, because dubbing is when you overdub, you record something on top of something that's already there. So maybe that's what they're talking about.
But dub, this is the first time that the engineer becomes a musical artist, essentially a creative musical artist.
Yes. For me, it's a liberation from like 80 years of or maybe 60 years, 40 years, I don't know how much, of mechanical domination over musicians. Because once the film industry had sound, then the soundtracks were being made by real musicians who had to listen to a click track. All of a sudden, everything had to be done to 120, which is 2 beats per second. And all the Warner Brothers orchestrations, they sound like they change tempos all the time, but they're all multiples or divisions of 120 beats per second. And all of a sudden, musicians had to behave like machines. So the machines were dominating musicians ever since, sound came to picture. And then only in Jamaica in the 60s do, some geniuses decide, you know what, I'm going to use this delay not to simulate reality, but I'm going to use it as a musical participant in the result. So you create polyrhythms with the delay, or you could create tones with the reverb, and using them for musical purposes, not for their intended spatial duplication, realism copying purposes, and it was the first time that musicians turned, made like dominated the machines. And it's, in a way, it's like humans winning over the machines. And it's not, and it's not praised like this because it didn't happen in Leipzig, but believe me, it's a hugely important thing,
Yeah.
Maybe it didn't happen in Geneva or fucking Naples, but no, it happened in Jamaica, it happened in Kingston. So, it doesn't mean it isn't as important.
Sure. If dub hadn't happened, I have no idea what the how DJ culture and electronic music, if it would have even happened, or how it would have happened, because it stemmed from this.
Oh yeah. Oh, totally. They're responsible for so much good things in the world.
Yeah. So you're approaching, you're doing dubs, and it's a musical instrument. You kind of have, it seems like you have unlimited options. So how do you approach? What are some ways to approach it, like an instrument, I guess?
I guess the one thing that continues from the Version City days, like back then I was limited to 8 tracks, and these days from a computer there's no limit. But I still use 8 tracks on the mixing desk. So I will still sum the drums, like track 1 will still be the bass drum, track 2 will still be a sum of all the other drums and percussion instruments. Track 3 will still be the bass. So I'm still reducing it to what my options were at Version City. And in fact, the delays, I only use like 1 delay and 1 echo these days. I used to use more, but I'm using them more musically and not as spatially anymore. So my whole point of doing the dub shows with the equipment was to show people how dub used to be made.
Yeah. So you, I think, I'm not sure if we totally explained that, but you were doing, or you are currently doing live dubbing. And I know at some point you even put a camera down on the mixing board to show people that you were doing it, that it wasn't just a pre-recorded thing, that you were actually doing it live.
Yeah, that was something I wound up having to do in a way, because people were interrupting me during the set, asking me to play something else. Not everywhere, I I mean, not in Italy, but in Germany, people were like, could you play? Or in Switzerland, they weren't getting it. But I mean, Italy, no problem. That people knew what I was doing. France, people know what I'm doing. But I mean, this is like 20 years ago. Now
Sure.
that but what happened is that people come up to me asking me for requests or something, and I'd say I can't really, that isn't what this is, and I can't even tell you about it right now because I'm in the middle of something. But and then I realized, the ultimate line of defense would be to just put a projection behind me of the desk and my hands working, so that people knew that I was actually, participating in the music they were hearing. You know what I mean? I wasn't a DJ. It wasn't just a selector. I'm actually making the shit that they're hearing. And then I created a YouTube channel, and that's basically the same thing. For me, it's really important to die on that hill, to say like, look, I do this in one take. This is improvised. This is how they did it. And what you do isn't dubbed, get like real gatekeepy shit. But for me, it's not important that I don't judge other people, what they're doing, especially with the ska, with the dub. But it's really important that I gatekeep myself. I am my own gatekeeper, and I know, I live by my rules. And so to make that point, I had the YouTube channel, and I project the mixing desk at shows.
And your name is Strikkly Vikkly. Is that, am I pronouncing it right?
Strikkly Vikkly.
Strikkly Vikkly. All right.
Yeah. I didn't even know what Strikkly Dickly was. This Strikkly Vikkly is so old. I've never even heard the phrase Strikkly Dickly.
Yeah, I've never heard that phrase. What does that mean?
Tell us what that is.
People who just want the dick.
Oh.
like some girl goes, oh, that guy's really cute, and then her friend will be like, forget about it, he's Strikkly Dickly. Yeah.
So Strikkly Vikkly is people who just want the Vic.
I wanted to make a triumvirate. Me, Victor Axelrod, and Victor Ruggiero, the club of the Vics. Only Vics allowed. Strikkly Vikkly. But Vic didn't have time, and Axelrod Tickler, he actually wasn't interested because he was already doing battle like with two names. People knew him as Victor Axelrod, or they knew him as Tickler. And he was having a problem resolving these two separate audiences who didn't know that it was the same guy. And he's like, there's no way I'm going into a third moniker. That's, my manager's already pissed at me. So that didn't happen. So we called a tune Strikkly Vikkly, because we had a bunch of, we made 5 rhythms together, me and Axelrod, with me playing bass and him playing drums. And we've recycled those many a time since. Recorded at Version City. Those rhythms, for some reason, always get picked by the Jamaicans when they want to sing something. They really gravitate towards that session at Version City. So and since then I was like, all right, so I'm Strikkly Vikkly in that case. It's strictly me. It's only me. It's like, fine, I can do this, kind of like that. So that became my dub name and the name of the dub system, the Strikkly Vikkly dub system, which is 4 crates of equipment and me. And when I show up at whatever bar, they're like, they can't believe I show up, they think I'm the roadie because I'm setting everything up. I'm like, no, they're like, where's everyone else? I'm like, no, it's just me, strictly me, Strikkly Vikkly, man. And it's awesome, dude. It is awesome to cross Europe in a car by yourself. The amount of support you get from people seeing that you're doing it alone. And they're like, all these goddamn wires and all this, why are you doing this? Is so impractical. Well, I'm like, yeah, but people like to see the tape. And the first time you do a live rewind and they hear do 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 do, it's fascinating to watch their faces, man. That is so satisfying. The first time somebody hears the machine makes that sound, it's like, imagine hearing a meow all your life. You hear meow, 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 meow. You don't even think about it. It's in songs, meow, meow, meow. Then one day you see a cat and the cat goes meow, and you're like, holy shit, that's the thing that makes the thing, you know? It's a cat. And that's the expression on these faces, man, in Italy and in Czech Republic. Holy shit, do they love it there, man. Hungary, Ciudad de Mexico. Oh my God. These guys were just bugging the fuck out. Like, we never knew what device made that sound. It's on all the reggae hits, you know?
Yeah.
Comac selector. It's like everyone's, it's a sample on everyone's like $10 keyboard, you know? It's like, but they never knew where it came from. So that's fun. That's supremely fun. And there are places like in Italy, the occupied spaces that have become cultural centers. Most cities have one, and I do workshops. And I'll do that in Switzerland as well. Workshops are very popular in Switzerland and Italy. So it's fun to be a traveling, solo, retro, techno, throwback, futuristic, whatever.
So are you talking about some of the more like established squats in those places?
Right. The Casas Ocupadas, CSOA. There, it's when somebody makes a squat, they invade a building, and the city's like, well, they're maintaining the building, they're doing reforms, and they're fixing stuff, and then they're like, all right, tell you what, if you open up an English school, or if you open up an Italian school for the immigrants, and you open up a kitchen, we'll let you have it. Do some things for, and then there's this like there in Italy, there is this sort of there is a dialogue between the occupiers and the state.
Yeah.
Which is great. It's amazing.
Yeah. And then you end up with these like little, like almost like micro cities within the city where it's like a totally different vibe. Do you end up sleeping there too when you? Yes, totally. I love it. I love staying at the squats, and I don't even think of them as squats really, because sure,
I've stayed at squats too, and that's yeah, you take it or leave it. But these spots in Italy, like the one in Turin, the one in Genova, they're just so well run, and everything's there. And I offer free bass lessons when I'm there. I give free, I stay on the premises, and there's food, there's beer, and there's ganja, and they're just awesome. They know what counts. They're grateful for what I'm doing, and I just stay there when I have days off, and participate. Give lessons or workshop or whatever it is they think I can give to the folks. Mm-hmm. Man, it's great. It's almost better than performing. There's something about teaching that is like, that can be, more satisfying than performing.
Sure. So how long do you usually stay in these spaces?
A week. Cool. Like if I'm in Italy, I'll be in Torino. That'll be my home base. And then I'll drive to Genoa, and maybe, I'll drive back, And Italians, they're like, wow, you're going to drive for 2 hours? That's so long. I'm like, dude, don't even get started.
Have you been to Christiania?
In Denmark, I have not. And I would love to go there. I have a friend now living in Copenhagen. So I hope that one day I get a little more north than I've been. Germany's a tough nut to crack. And I'm not sure what to do about it, because I know that I could be playing more places. And I think the people that most appreciate my music, people who most dig it, are in Germany, particularly East Germany. And but it's Germany is a tough nut to crack, because they don't pay very well, but their hospitality is amazing, and it's hard to get gigs, or at least it's been hard for me to get more gigs in Germany. I'd love to get in there more, because people just it's probably because I study Bach or whatever, but my music is like Germanic, and they get it. The guys in Czech get it. There's a tune I did that's I totally lifted off a Hungarian a cappella peasant song, and they get it. They play it in Hungary. Gogo Bordello play it all the time. Like, it's weird. It's like just one of those things that, like it's a ska beat, but they absolutely get it. They get it that it's Hungarian. And I'm working on a great project now with Pannonia All Stars, based on Hungarian folk music. Should be out next year.
Ooh, what's the name of that project?
Working title is With Apologies to Bela Bartok, because he would never sanction this project, because he was very purist. He was a purist. He was trying to preserve Hungarian folk music, and the fact that I'm putting some old melodies on top of like Drum Song by Jackie Mitu or other reggae rhythms, he would never tolerate. But I'm inspired by the guy. The guy has inspired me to do so many things, and he inspired his way I compose. His microcosmos. His simple piano pieces for the that start simple and get progressively more complex. I love the first few books. I mean, to me, it's like he's reduced some really big ideas into a very easy thing, and that's what I'm trying to do with my music. Trying to reduce some tricky math ideas or something that may not necessarily should be able to work, but it can. But I'm trying to do it on a scale that's not over people's heads. I'm not trying to.
Mm-hmm.
I want it. I mean, if I want it to be danceable, first of all. Right. So the ska beat is what I decided this is where I can do it. Ska, it's instrumental. It's there is room for composing tricks, and it's fun, and it's reggae, and I'm a bass player, so of course ska music became for me like just I championed it after school in the 90s. I decided to take it really seriously because I thought it was just I didn't need ska to be really popular. I just wanted to know that there existed a genre where I could, where my music would be appreciated,
Yeah.
There's a project you did kind of recently where you did a dub of Hepcats from Out of Nowhere, Dub Out of Nowhere.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
Wow. When they contacted me about that, I was like, holy shit. I'm just amazed. I've always loved that band.
They're so good.
Yeah,
it sounds interesting, and I know you're no stranger to using more like ska and rocksteady type beats for dub, because I think what I kind of want to ask about is like, you think about King Tubby and a lot of this sort of famous dubs, and it's usually really slow, usually really tripped out, and it has a certain vibe to it. But you doing, you listen, just for instance, the from Dub Out of Nowhere, it has a different vibe because the beat's different.
Yeah.
Anything to say about that?
I know that ska has never gotten a good dubbing back in the 60s. That it's like it never really happened originally. But I love doing that. I love using more accelerated tempos and different beats altogether. There's a lot of I've been making dubs of Brazilian music that totally works. I mean, as long as it's danceable, as long as there's a drummer that you can count on, literally, it can be done, and I love showing that. A lot of these arrangements, a lot of the songs that you listen to, these days you can automate it on a computer and people decide when the guitars come in or not, or when the keyboard comes in and that kind of thing, breakdowns. And these are arrangements that are made on the computer. But, back in the day, people would make these arrangements live on the desk, rock bands, it's a picture of, I think it was Pink Floyd. Maybe it was the Beatles. I can't remember. There's a picture of them in the studio and at least 3 of them on the mixing desk doing their, assigned parts, their roles of like bringing up faders or not. Because there'd be 24 faders. So you'd have like 3 guys there. They'd each, have 8. You've got 8 fingers and then you're done. And they sit there and go, all right, bring out the vocals. All right, bow. All right, take them out now. All right, real whole operation coordinated.
Yeah.
So I mean, in that sense, and that's on some of we'd never know because it doesn't sound like dub, but a lot of the arrangements we hear back in the day were made, in real time.
Oh yeah, just we kind of strayed a little from Version City, and before we move on, I want to ask. There was a lot of different recordings made there, be it songs or albums. I was wondering if you had any. What do you feel like are a couple of the best? Looking back at the Version City days, like what are some of the best recordings to come out of Version City?
I always think of a Rocketees record as the pinnacle.
Yeah.
It's sort of the pinnacle. It was the most daring. It's the most Sergeant Pepper. It was the most like that guy was he wouldn't get tired. He wouldn't sleep. I mean, he'd keep us going there. And me and Jay would work in shifts around T because, he wasn't sleeping, Jay's like, I'm done. Can you come down? Yeah. And then I'm like, all right, come in there. Toby's like, all right, we got a fresh engineer. Let's go. And he's got more ideas and stuff. Motherfucker wouldn't sleep. And then I finally go home and Jay would come back and he had, T would have taken a nap of like half an hour or something. Then he blink, blink. Hey, who wants the next sandwich? Let's go. Amazing. So I have fond memories of really busting my ass over that record. Jay more than me.
I was actually listening to that record today. It's so good.
I really enjoy that one. That was just crazy undertaking. And for example, there's the I Story lesson where he's talking about Ethiopia, and those drums were from my first recording at Version City with Eddie, from a song called Damage that only appears on a compilation, Version City comp. And those drums were used many, many times, but that's one of the instances.
Okay, so 2002 is when you moved to Brazil, I believe?
Yes.
Do you want to talk a little bit about why you chose Brazil?
It's really hard to talk a little about it. That's the problem I've had, and it's the question I always get. And I started writing an essay about all the reasons, and because I was like, this has to be written out, and just totally, it's more than I could say in an interview. It's more than, but it was a combination of forces at once, working at once. One of them was that I was tired of living in New York, because by the 90s, Giuliani was mayor, and he was kind of making it kind of just sad for everybody. And I had been touring in Europe, and I was like, oh my God, musicians are treated with dignity here. It's really amazing, So there was this pull from Europe. I was getting a push from New York. And then in 98, I was playing bass with the Toasters in Brazil. I got to see São Paulo. And I was like, holy shit, this is, New York used to be like this. And it never gets cold here. Oh my God. And people are so nice. And wow, what's that fruit? It's like, oh, you like that? There's more than that. And then like 3 hours away and you're on a tropical beach. It's really close to the ocean. A lot of people don't talk about it because it's 20 million people, concrete jungle, and then like 3 hours in a car and you're on, your feet are in the sand and palm trees, and it's just incredible. I was like, oh, I can do this, and nobody was really into the downtown. They still aren't. I live in the center of town, which is not very appreciated, valorized, but I like it because I'm close to all the trains and the buses and all the stores. If I feel like I'm in Manhattan, downtown, yeah, it's a little sketchy, but I remember, I lived in New York in the 80s, and I was like, I know what that is. I lived in Harlem in the 80s for 11 years. And it was like, this is okay,
Yeah, honestly, which one was sketchier?
Down here is sketchier these days.
Okay.
Days. It used to be better. When I got down here in 2002, it was much better.
Okay.
But it's been, ever since the new regime in 2017, the quality of life has just been nosediving, So, all right. So first there was me thinking, I don't like New York anymore. And then there was me thinking, I'm going to live in Budapest where nobody speaks English. I'm so tired of English. And then I see Sao Paulo and I'm like, it doesn't get cold. It's got a New York scheme about it. It's got the same diversity that New York has in people, and which you couldn't say about Budapest. And that was really important to me. If I was going to leave a big city, you know, the only thing that was going to please me would be a bigger city. And I was like, Sao Paulo's so goddamn big. You know, it's incredible, just amazing. Really drew me in. And after a couple of visits here, I really knew I wanted to be here. So I left after 9/11. That was the kick in the ass right there. 9/11, I was like, oh my God, fuck these people. You know, it's like, I got to explain. I was working at a studio for TV, post-production, and 9/11 is going on. You know, we're on 45th Street watching on the TV, and then somewhere in the afternoon, like one of the producers decided they still wanted to work. Like, fuck this, let's get to work. I was like, Jesus, all right, okay, you know, my producer for the day. And they're on the phone. They're trying to get shit to happen. Nobody's picking up at NBC. Nobody's picking up at their house. The nanny has gone home. The bridges are closed. And this person slams the phone down and goes, this whole day is just so inconvenient. And I'm thinking, that's not the word. That's fucking horrible. These are the people I have around me. And then I got wise and I paid off my debts and I did it slowly, took Portuguese lessons and came down in February 2002. So now it's been 20 years that I'm here.
So I know you do, obviously you have the studio, you do producing and stuff, but you play music, or you have been playing music down there as well, right?
Off and on. I play more with the dub show than actually playing the bass. But lately, I mean the last couple of years, I've been playing in a Bob Marley cover band. And it's awesome. Oh my God. I was so over playing covers because I used to pay my bills that way when I was getting started in New York. I was playing wedding bands, you know? So I never, I was so happy to not play covers. And when I decided not to become an orchestral musician, that was, in the sense, I was saying no more covers. I want to develop my own music. And I still feel that way, but there's something about Aston Barrett, Family Man, the bass player for the Wailers, that I owe so much to his style, and that his bass lines have become a school in itself on how to play the bass and how to play reggae. Much the same way that James Jamerson, bass player from Motown, became a school, of bass playing. And so I love playing those lines. I dig in. I try and get every note, I've seen some Beatles fanatics and they get every note that Paul McCartney ever played, and it's amazing. But for me, it's like my Paul McCartney is Family Man. I love playing that shit.
I know you did a band called Firebug.
Yes, down here in Sao Paulo.
Yeah, was that when you first moved out there?
It is. I came down here with a huge amount of help from my friend Rodrigo Cerqueira, who was playing drums in a band called Scuba, ska band that opened for the Toasters, and that's how we became friends. And when he heard I was coming down here to live, he was like, dude, stay at my place until you find your own. Let's do some stuff. Let's get you working. He did more than anybody to get me situated down here. And he's like, I want to do this band. And there's this kid, Machado, brings him over to my place. He plays and sings, the acoustic guitar and sings some tunes. I love it. Rodrigo's like, let's make a record. I'll bank it. You produce it. His songs, boom. And that's what we did. That was the first record. I wanted to call it Machado because he's the talent. And I just thought, like, me and Rodrigo were more like the Chris Blackwells of the thing, and I wanted to call it Machado. I wanted him to have the cover onto himself. But Rodrigo was like, no, it's going to be a band. We'll call it Firebug. And that's what it was for 3 records. They did 3 records. They toured in Europe. Never got to the States. But I'm really proud of those guys because it's really probably the first like traditional ska record to come out of Brazil, with like real trad treatment, sonically, musically, the arrangements. I got heavily involved with the arrangements. I wrote all the horn parts, most of the melodies on the instruments.
Yeah, I've researched a little bit of Brazilian bands that play ska, and it seems like there's a lot of bands, in the 80s, 90s, 2000s that have ska songs, but not really ska bands. It's just like sort of one bag of tricks, and then they have other rhythms and other styles.
That makes me think of Os Paralamas, who were the most famous band in Brazil that played ska tunes.
Yeah, they started, I think, in the late 70s, and then ska stuff, I think, came in the 80s.
Yep. And they had the access because they're all the guys in Paralamas, their parents were in the military. So they had access to the outside world and shit. They probably heard ska before anybody. And they do it nice. They do it, they do it right.
Yeah, they got some great songs. But the idea of somebody doing a strictly like traditional type of ska record hadn't really happened before, though. So the rhythm and the appreciation for ska as pop music had been around a while.
Well, there was that band, Rodrigo's first band, Scuba, that they were basically a ska band, very much modeled after the Toasters. That was their version of ska. A couple more that were like punk bands, like Epitones, the Djangos. But I think Firebug was the only band that actually went to a studio with a tape machine and had like, horn arrangements and, just a whole other level of production, than most ska bands were. It's not like they didn't have ska in Brazil. It's just, first time it was like trad ska, well done, traditionally recorded.
I see.
And I remember being so proud of that record. I brought it up to Belgium in 2003 when I was working with the Moon Invaders, and they were like, "Oh my God, this is amazing! It's incredible." Then somebody's like, "Hey, have you heard this new record yet? It's a new band called the Agrolites." And then I heard that, and I was like, "Oh God damn it, this is so good." I was vexed. I was very pissed off. I was like, I thought I had the new shit. I thought I had the best. I thought I had the best shit this year, and then I hear the goddamn Agrolites, and they're killing it. I felt the same way. I felt the same way when I was playing bass for Desmond Dekker. The Scofflaws had opened for him in '92, and then he lost his bass player. I had to go back to England, so I went on for the half of the tour that the Scofflaws weren't opening. I jumped in the Desmond Dekker van and was their bass player. My first time seeing going across Canada, my first time going across US, my first time touring in North America. Got all the way to California. And, the guys in the band, in Desmond's band, English blokes, that they were like, "Oh, we love the Scofflaws. They're the only ones doing it right. The only ones doing it." And we were so proud of ourselves. We really thought we're the only ones trying to sound like the Skatalites. And then we're in LA and the opening band is Hepcat. Enough said, right? I mean, like the guitar player, he turns to me, he's like, "Sorry, Rice, but they've really got it, I mean, they're the best." I was like, I know, fuck them, fuck me. and I felt the same way when I heard the Agrolites.
Yeah, it's so
I
good.
really did. I felt like just like, wow, they, I think I'm onto something, and somebody just does it 10 times better or whatever.
So you've put out 4 records under your own name, Victor Rice.
Yes.
So we have At Version City from 1999.
Yep.
In America, I think was 2003. You did that one, right? You recorded that one in the US and you mixed it after you moved to Brazil.
That one was done both in US and Brazil. Most of the rhythm tracks were done, all of the rhythm tracks were done in Brooklyn at Tickla's place. I finished them a certain way in Brazil, and I also siphoned off one of the drum tracks a few times and created other songs with it. And then I went back to New York at one point. So there are three songs on In America that are, there's the Sao Paulo version and the New York version. And the main difference is that I had wanted horns originally, but in Brazil I didn't know anybody. So when I got to so I would finish it myself with using keys and melodica, maybe guitar to play the melodies. When I got back to New York, I decided to finish them the way I originally intended. So there are 2 or 3 songs that are that have 2 versions: the New York version with horns and the Sao Paulo version with melodica and stuff. It's definitely it wasn't intended to be this, but it is a document of my migration.
Okay, so then you have Smoke from 2017 and Drink from 2020. So kind of have a big gap between your second and third record. Did you feel like an inspiration sort of recently to start doing solo records again?
When I moved, I guess I just got more into engineering, and that's where the work was. And I still was, I did tour with the In America. But there was something about writing more music. I mean, I was always writing stuff down. I always have my notebooks, and if I think of an idea in my head, I can write it down without having to play it on an instrument. I just, sketch it out. And so I never stopped doing that. But it was in 2013. I mean, it seems like a long stretch, but it wasn't so long, is what I'm getting at, because I think it was like a 10-year stretch maybe. Because in 2013, I started writing a lot of stuff, and I was stuck in Europe for a while. And I decided to go to Nico's place, Nico Leonard of Moon Invaders and now of Batasonic. And he has a studio. And he helped me to record a bunch of stuff, and that became Smoke. It came out in 2017, but we started work on it in 2013.
Oh, okay.
And when Easy Star chose to put it out, I was thrilled. It's the best label I've ever worked for. And by far, they just, have their shit so together, and everything's so, runs so well, So I was thrilled when they wanted to put it out. And they're like, give us another one. And I was like, oh, that's easy. Now that the, faucet's been turned on, I've been writing a lot of shit, so Drink came out pretty easily. And actually, I'm going to complete the trilogy. I have, in April, I recorded all the basic tracks for the next record, the third of the trilogy. Title unknown. We're calling it Game of Horns for now. So that's been awesome. Very, very satisfying to put these records out with Easy Star, because they really get it, and they really back it up. They're really making me feel supported on this, So I'm doing them all the same way: recording in Belgium, mixing in Sao Paulo, calling people from all around the world to finish, for finishing touches. And, very much all 3 will be made in the same vein.
I like the covers too. Would you call that Art Deco style?
I don't know. What happened was the first one was just a fluke. I really liked the image. I don't know how I found it online. I think I must have put like tiki cats or something, or tiki designs or something. And then these cats showed up. I was like, oh, that's really cute. So I put it on my SoundCloud playlist when I showed it to the guys at Easy Star. And I'm like, I still don't have an idea for art. They're like, oh, we love the cats. I'm like, yeah, right. It's not bad. So I found the artist, and I told him I wanted 2 cats, specifically Nico's cats, Bongo and Cuica. 2 black cats. They have very certain personalities. They're awesome. They're my buddies. And I wanted them on. So she painted Bongo and Cuica. Decided to call it Smoke. Made it red, all of these choices were not really based on anything deeper than, just looks cool. Looks like, 50s style. Looks like it sounds, good.
Yeah.
And then they're like, do another one. Do a trilogy. So I was like, so then, the idea of trilogy is like the next one will be gold and the third one will be green. All right, that's sorted. We'll call it drink because it's another vice. It's an English word that Brazilians use. It's a verb. It's a noun. Has that in common. And I was like, what will the animal be? All right, the animal will be fish because fish drink. So now the next one, I know it's going to be green. I don't know what the name is, and I don't know what the animal's going to be. It's going to be green. I'm calling it the Green Album already, but the band calls it Game of Horns because I run them through it this time. It's not meant to sound complicated, but it is complicated for the musicians. It shouldn't be complicated to listen to. A song like Five. Five is really tough for the musicians to play. That one on Drink.
Why is it so difficult?
Well, all the divisions. It's called five because there are 5 chords in the song, but each chord only has 2 beats. So the chords repeat themselves after 2.5 bars. So then 5 bars, they repeat themselves, at the 1. And then the horn line is 4 bars, and then it's another 3 bars, and then it's another 3 bars. So that's 10. So that works out. That fits. But the drummer's got a 2-bar drum beat. And so it only feels right to him at 10 bars. Like every 10 bars is when he has to bring it back. So the form is 10 bars long, and it's hard to count. I know Nico. The problem with Nico is that he's a musician. I don't mean like, oh, he's not a drummer, he's a musician. I mean like, there's a joke, what do you call a guy who hangs out with musicians? Drummer. But the truth is he went to conservatory and he makes horn arrangements and he's, fluent on the piano and percussion, and he's completely trained like me. 2 nerds. We do the same thing. We write down our ideas, just give the music to the musicians, press play, and let's go. Very controlling, and sort of everything's all written down already, So he has problems following the chart. He's listening to it, and he's listening so well that it messes him up every time. Every time he hears that 5th chord, go back to the 1st chord when it shouldn't. And then and if he starts listening to the horns, he gets really messed up because first phrase is 4 bars, but then the second phrase is 3. The third phrase is 3. And so he has to sort of like not listen in order to play it right, and the horn players, they're still like their solos. You can tell they haven't had a chance. It's been 2 years. We released in May of 2020. It was released into a pandemic vacuum. There was no way to tour on it, and we only started playing it this April. We played 1 show, Freedom Sounds Festival. It was a pisser. It was so good. But you can tell that the musicians, their first time, the soloists trying to navigate these changes, the way they go, and trying to make 4 out of 5, trying to square the circle. But as far as people on the dance floor, they're just like funk, baby, boom, 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 boom. It's so danceable. If you don't have to play it.
Yeah. And then that horn part that's 4 and then 3 and then 3 do the 4 and the 3 part like mirror each other in any way? Like, do they start out with a similar phrase?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, jeez. So it's just extra hard.
It's like the first phrase gets cut down, and that cut down version gets repeated, and then you're at the back, and then you're up top again. And it's that one. Those poor guys.
So why do you hate all the musicians in your band? I mean,
well, I do have to pay them.
True. True. Got to make them earn it.
Oh, I mean, yeah, I mean, like I would be embarrassed to ask these guys to do this kind of thing without being paid, you know? And I try not to get myself into situations where they can't get paid. They certainly get paid before I do. And they respect that. And they love the game, you know, they love figuring it out. I know that, like, if I get these guys on the road for a month, they're going to be playing the hell out of these tunes. You know, they're going to have figured out how they want to get around that particular curve in the harmonic thing, and they'll develop some tools and tricks. You know, I mean, they need a month to get into that. You need time on the road to really get a tune worked in. You know.
Thank you so much for listening to In Defense of Ska. If you've enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe to the podcast wherever you normally stream or download episodes. If you haven't already, grab a copy of my book, In Defense of Ska, available at clashbooks.com. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. It's at In Defense of Ska. And please consider joining our Patreon at patreon.com/indefenseofska. You will get monthly bonus episodes, extended interviews and commentary per episode, and access to the In Defense of Ska Discord. In Defense of Ska would not be possible without the great team that tirelessly works on it every week. So you should go check out their other projects as well. Co-host Adam Davis has an amazing band called Omnigon. Give them a follow on Instagram and Twitter. It's simply at Omnigon. And our editor, Chris Reeves, has a phenomenal record label and podcast called Ska Punk International. For more information, go to skapunkinternational.com. And if you've ever enjoyed one of the highly specific In Defense of Ska memes floating around the interwebs, it was likely the work of The Bands I Like Only Charge $18. Find them on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. On that note, we leave you by saying, Ska now more than ever.
In Defense of Ska is hitting the West Coast. Mustard Plug, Bucko9, and Omnigon finally hitting the road together. We've been waiting to play these shows for over a year. Linktree.com/indefenseofska tour for links to buy tickets. Thursday, September 8th, San Diego, California at the Soda Bar. Friday, September 9th, Las Vegas, Nevada at the Backstage Bar and Billiards. Saturday, September 10th at the Mesa, Arizona Nile Theater. Sunday, September 11th in Garden Grove with Noise Complaint and 2:30. Monday, September 12th, San Jose, California at the Ritz. Tuesday, September 13th in San Francisco, California at Bottom of the Hill. Wednesday, September 14th, Sacramento, California at Goldfield Trading Post. Thursday, September 15th in Eugene, Oregon at Old Nick's Pub. Friday, September 16th in Seattle, Washington at El Corazon. And Saturday, September 17th in Portland, Oregon at Dante's. This is my first tour since 2006. If you're on the fence about going to this, what are you waiting for? Get a ticket, show up early, stay late. I look forward to seeing you. Aaron wants to see you. We'll see you soon. And don't forget to listen to the podcast, share it with your friends. All right.